Kelly Wendland, vodcast.
Oh my
That's
goodness.
the kind of production we put into play here. It's
Is
big
it?
time.
I was
Well,
looking for you to actually be playing the guitar, but either way.
I would have, but that's a little slightly more polished version of an intro than me just picking on a guitar. How's your day going, Casandra Noyes? Great to have you on the program.
Thank you. It's going good. It's been busy, so that's always a positive, right?
Yeah, it is. It is positive, and that's why we're here today is to talk a little bit about the market and um, it's good that it's busy, and I feel like I'm busy too, but I also recognize that it has been a downturn for most of us. We've been lucky at Logisolve, I think comparatively, uh, but overall,
Yeah.
still the market. When you talk to competitors, the market has been very difficult, and you see that with availability. Are you seeing that same thing?
Absolutely. I think, like you said, Logisolve has been doing well. I think, the recognition we've gotten this past year has been amazing, especially making the Fast 50 last week was awesome. So overall, you'd like to say, okay, yeah, everything's going great. But at the same time, to your point, the economy and the market are definitely changing. And I have a friend who's in real estate who said, and I think it's comparable to our business, is that they've never worked so hard for such little results. And so, I think that's probably, it's not that you're not getting results, and we're still getting results and we're still getting wins, but you're working much harder to get those. And there's a lot more competition out there and a lot more tighter budgets. And so I think that makes everything a little bit more difficult. But yeah.
How do you think it compares? You and I have been in the industry about the same amount of time.
Yep.
How do you think it compares to the other two that we've went through for the IT? People in other industries laugh probably because we've only been through two of them in
Yeah.
our pretty good number of years in IT. But how do you think it compares so far?
Yeah. I always say like the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And I think, in my opinion, so far, the last two actually seem to be a little bit worse. I don't think this seems to be as bad because there is still money being spent. I think maybe it's being spent differently. And maybe they're looking for a little bit different level of resource than they have in the past. But I don't think there's no jobs out there, which I think we kind of saw a little bit of in the past, right? So far it feels a little bit better. We'll see how that all plays out though. But
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have to adjust.
And so, that gets to the specifics on why people will probably be watching this. How do people, you've been on both the corporate side, you've been on the consulting side. How does a candidate, how do people stand out in a tough job market like this?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. So, yeah, I was a consultant for many years myself. So, let's just be totally honest. My resume is not fantastic either, right? I think as humans, it's always difficult to do your own resume. One, because I think Minnesotans are humble by nature. So, we don't like to brag. And sometimes a resume feels like you're taking too much credit for the work and you're not giving enough credit to others. And we tend to be, area that likes to give credit to others. So that's hard for some people. Number two, they're just tedious to write. And then three, it is, what is capturing the attention of the hiring managers. And quite frankly, now there are so many middle layers. So there's these applicant tracking systems for direct hire roles. There's VMS for consulting. And so how do you get recognized before you even get to the hiring manager? So how do I get in front of the person that I could probably win over if I got an interview, but I got to get to them first. So
Yeah, that's some great comments there. What are the little things on the resume? What are the little things that get a person noticed? When you used to be in the
yeah.
corporate role, when you would put one out of 20 applicants to the side to say, okay, I want to talk to this person. What was it about that particular resume that did
Yeah.
that?
So I've been fortunate to both be a hiring manager and on the VMS side. And, I think a couple of things that are really important that I tell people, there's probably a lot of things. And I wrote an article in the Solve last week that has probably too many to discuss today. But a couple of them are, I think you really need to make it yours. And that's kind of what I just mentioned. You have to be able to demonstrate what you were responsible for and what outcomes you personally delivered. So giving too much credit to the full project or too much credit to the project team within the resume, or just putting a job description in there, usually isn't what they want to see. They want to see specifically what did you do, how did you do it, and what were the outcomes of that. So I think bringing it to that level. And then the other thing that I tell people a lot that I noticed, and actually I noticed this by reviewing resumes that were getting declined that I actually thought were really good. So I'm like, hey, I thought this was a great candidate. I gave it to the hiring manager. I think, when I read the resume, they probably have what you want. And then the hiring manager would toss it to the side. And that was a little bit about don't leave your resume up to interpretation. So I always say when somebody is writing a resume that if there's anything in your resume that can be left up for interpretation, do not assume that they're going to interpret it the same way that you are hoping that they do. And so I use a really simple example all the time. So if I'm a business analyst and I just say business analyst, and in my head, I'm thinking, well, they know I gathered requirements. I created UAT testing. I, did user stories. That's not always the case. So if you go from company to company, business analysis doesn't mean the same in every company. Project management doesn't mean the same in every company. So again, making it yours and bringing it down to the level to say, as a business analyst, this is what I did, and this is how I did it, and this was the outcome of my work, I think is critical so that they aren't deciding for you what they thought you did. So, if you're a PM and they think they automatically assume you do budgeting, but you've been in PM roles where you've never been responsible for a budget, you'd want to make sure that's called out so there's not that discrepancy between what they want and what you need. So I think those are two big ones that are important when doing the resume. And then, honestly, just keeping it simple is highly important too. So just not a lot of flash and distraction. We as humans are busy. We probably have some level of squirrel. So anything that's going to take us off track of what we're trying to look at, is not good. You want to keep them focused on what they want to see and be able to make sure that they can see that quickly. So
how about putting your energy into different mediums? How the resume, obviously people just don't like, most people, we don't love working on our own resumes, but you can also, be working on your LinkedIn profile or put video attachments to your resume. Are those things worth doing, or should 80% of your energy go to the resume and then 20% to the others? What's your take on that?
My take is it should just go to the resume and it should be simple and plain. And that those other things would be saved for roles where you're going to be utilizing that type of stuff. So maybe if you were a graphic designer, you would maybe use some of that stuff. But if it's not directly related to the job you'll be doing, then it wouldn't be necessary. And that would be what I think would be considered a little bit probably more of a distraction. I always use the keep it simple rule. So again, just simple, easy to find. Most hiring managers, let's be honest, their job isn't to hire people, right? Their job is to do what they do for the organization. They're usually overworked. By the time they decide they need a resource, or I shouldn't even say that, by the time they get approval to get a resource, they already needed someone a month ago, right? So they're literally like, give me 5 resumes. I need A, B, and C, and I want to clearly see, oh, this person's done A, B, and C. Bring them in for an interview, right? And if they can't pick it out fairly quickly and get someone on board quickly, I think that's a little bit of a disadvantage. And one thing I didn't mention earlier that I'm going to throw in here is the other thing that I think that's important in a resume is so many people focus on the job description and the keywords and the technical requirements, which are all important. But I think we're seeing a lot of managers want to feel for the soft skills. So they want to know who you are when you show up to the project, what differentiates you from everybody else that has the same technical skills that you do. So how do you bring more of yourself into the resume? And I know that's really hard. And so, a lot of people do things like the strength finders and all of those. Those are helpful, but you can also just sit back and think, every time I show up on a project, this tends to happen, and it probably happens because I do X every time. And what is that? What is it you bring to every project that you're on outside of your technical skills? And if you can reflect that in your resume too, I think that helps. I've sat in on some manager calls recently, and they're specifically asking that. They're asking tell us more about the soft skills, not just the technical skills. That would
What
be
about making the transition from someone that's been a full-time employee for, 10 years, 7 years, 15 years, and they want to try consulting? Is there a chance, do they have an opportunity? Will their resumes be looked at? And would you recommend they look at consulting as an option?
Absolutely. I think their resumes would get looked at. I think it might be a little bit different about how they think about the resume. So, for example, a lot of times in corporate America, when you're going from job to job, they do use your previous job, job description. They do talk a little bit more about the entire project you worked on. And that's where you would want to take the other feedback we gave and bring it down to that level that's more personal and about you and what work you were responsible for and how you did it. But the other thing I would say is big is around titles. So a lot of people in the industry have been in the industry 10, 15, 20 years when they're coming into consulting. A lot of them have been fortunate to be in leadership positions, and all of the things you did in a leadership position are going to be important to that role. But your resume has to come across as you're still a person that rolls up your sleeve and does the work and not just leads. And so how you demonstrate that. So if a lot of the things you're putting in your resume are true leadership stuff, like managed the team, led the team, you would want to turn that into, again, a little bit more about what you did and how you did it to demonstrate you still are a doer. And so that would be my only advice to people switching out of corporate America, because corporate America is very title based. I would say in consulting, ignore the titles, really look at what is the job description and what are they looking for you to do and what can you bring to that work regardless of the title. And so it's a little bit different lens. And so not focusing on the titles and the leadership titles as much, but more focusing on the work you did would be my one recommendation for people switching over.
Casandra Noyes, thanks so much. Great information for everybody out there. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for your time. And
Thank
for
you.
everyone else out there, you are watching the Kelly Winlet Vodcast.
You got to take it out like you brought it in.
I